On October 8th, Bethesda's design director and lead writer Emil Pagliarulo put out a series of tweets in defense of some comments he made in an interview with Games Radar about the then upcoming Shattered Space DLC. If you go back and look at that interview, there's nothing outrageous in there. It's all pretty standard marketing, Pat. But the problem is what's not there. For a lot of Starfield fans, Shattered Space needed to be this game's version of Phantom Liberty. It couldn't just be another DLC. Bethesda needed to do more this time. Fans needed Starfield 2.0, a major revision that would fix a lot of things that everybody's been complaining about for the last year, but neither Emil or Bethesda said that, or even acknowledged fans' growing disillusionment over the state of the game. Starfield's been a divisive game from the start, but opinions have soured over the year. Steam reviews remain mixed for the main game, which is bad enough, but Steam users are even more negative about Shattered Space, which, as of recording, has mostly negative reviews. Ouch. Emil's tweets were meant, at least in part, to actually respond to the criticisms that he didn't address when promoting Shattered Space. The thread starts with a token attempt at reaching an understanding before it quickly devolves into Emil's usual defensive language when responding to criticism. By the time he's saying that, if folks have played Shattered Space and still don't like it, that makes me sad, honestly, and just know that we've also been hearing from plenty of people who love it. We've completely lost the plot. The point was that he was supposed to address how Bethesda views themselves versus how their fans see them, because from the outside looking in, it seems like Bethesda's pretty unaware of the problems many people have with Starfield and don't understand that they need to fix stuff. Or worse, they are aware and just don't care. They're just completely disinterested in addressing those problems. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Gameranx, all of this leads me to ask, just what the hell is going on at Bethesda? So, if you're unaware, and honestly, considering how many people bought the premium edition of Starfield but never logged back in to play Shattered Space, I assume that's probably a lot of you, but Starfield's first major DLC released on September 30th, 2024. Early review copies were not provided, and in general, the DLC got okay reviews. The important thing to keep in mind is that the DLC isn't horrible. It's not some kind of completely broken disaster. It's just nothing to get excited about. It's more Starfield, and that's the problem. In some ways, it is an honest improvement. The DLC is set on a single planet. It's got unique points of interest spread out on a specially made map. Once you enter the DLC area, you never have to get on a ship or go anywhere else. The entire story is set in this one spot, and it's pretty nice looking for what it is. It's an odd choice to exclude one of the primary parts of the game by having no space stuff whatsoever in the DLC, but whatever. It seems like it's kind of them admitting to themselves that flying around in space feels like filler more than anything else, and if they get that, fine. I'd rather not have the filler if they're not going to improve that aspect of the game. The DLC focuses on House Va'ruun, the third major faction that was conspicuously absent from the main game, which could be intriguing, but it's all the same tepid writing and simplistic mission design that's defined Bethesda Game Studios' recent output. It all ends on a non-choice that barely matters, and your one Va'ruun companion almost has nothing to say about returning to their capital city, which you would think, given the context, would matter a little more. The thing about Bethesda games is they're always kind of flawed. They've never not been that. There's so many issues you could level against their previous games, and we ignored that because the things we liked were great. The world design, the sandbox nature of the gameplay, the rewarding exploration, those are things that keep people coming back to Bethesda games. And back in their heyday, the bugs and the nonsense was almost considered charming. Because the fact is, the stuff they do right, when they're doing it right, they do better than almost anyone else. I don't care what anybody says, nobody manages to make games that are quite like Bethesda's games. But the problem with Starfield is the game doesn't really play to their strengths, I guess. In fact, more so I might say, it makes their weaknesses so much more apparent. Over the years, there's negativity surrounding their games. Like I mentioned, the bugs being charming, and when there's some kind of a problem, people start orienting themselves towards the idea that maybe those bugs aren't actually that charming. But usually the positivity outweighs it, and that ends up kind of not being a problem anymore. A lot of people hated Fallout 4 when it launched, but the overall impression of that game is still actually quite good. It doesn't seem to be happening with Starfield, though. It's been long enough for that to happen, and it's not. And that's why for fans, Shattered Space was really important. After the Cyberpunk 2077 DLC did so much work rehabbing that game's reputation, expectations were really high for this one. What Emil said, and I'm sorry, I don't want to rag on the guy because he gets more than enough of that already, but when he said maybe it's a game of expectations, he's 100% right. He may be trying to imply that fan expectations are too high by saying that. If you look at the rest of the reply, it really comes off that way, but he's not necessarily wrong. People were expecting a lot from Shattered Space, and for good reason. The bar has really been raised for DLC of that type, especially given the conditions surrounding it, that the game itself didn't get the reception that the developers were hoping for, certainly. There are problems with the game and stuff that makes it look like less of a disaster than Cyberpunk 2077, but of that nature, which contextualizes the DLC and its expectations. We've had some high-profile messes that have been fixed by the developers in recent years, Cyberpunk being one, No Man's Sky being another, and maybe not to the point where this is the norm, but if anybody was going to do that, certainly it would have been Bethesda with one of their high-profile new IPs, right? Or hell, take Cyberpunk out of the equation. Rogue Trader has the Void Shadows add-on, takes twice as long to get through compared to Shattered Space, includes a new companion, new enemies, weapons. It costs exactly the same amount as Starfield's DLC on its own. Also, when you buy it, you get the second DLC too, which looks like it's going to be just as fully featured as the first one. I mean, it's not actually even fair to compare this to Phantom Liberty. That's practically a sequel to Cyberpunk built in the same engine with a level of presentation beyond any other RPG out there, and it costs $30. In comparison, Shattered Space's 10 or so hours isn't really anything special. It's not even up to the standards of Bethesda's other DLCs like Far Harbor from Fallout 4. The closest comparison Shattered Space has to their older stuff is Dawnguard for Skyrim, but even compared to that, it is disappointing. Dawnguard improved the vampire gameplay. It added werewolves and a bunch of new weapons and enemies. Shattered Space has some new stuff too, but not in a significant amount. And certainly, it doesn't add anything major to the experience. It all pretty much feels the same. If the general opinion of Starfield were better, most people probably would be fine with this, but it's not, so expectations are, of course, higher. To the game's credit, they did recently patch the game with a few improvements by adding a buggy you can use to explore planets, but I mean, I don't want to say that that really matters that much. Everything else we've seen from Bethesda makes it seem like business as usual. That's actually the part that's particularly frustrating people. There's a lot of fans who want the game to be better and for Bethesda to take the criticism seriously and address those complaints in a more serious way. Instead, the messaging from them is generally deflecting criticism or just blaming the fans for expecting too much from itty-bitty little Bethesda, a game studio with more than 450 employees and multiple support studios behind them that's owned by Microsoft, which is unfathomably huge. They can't pretend to be the little guy, but their interactions with their own community are pretty consistently amateurish. Remember that time Bethesda responded to negative Starfield reviews by copy-pasting messages saying essentially that the review is wrong and actually Starfield is great? Or when Todd Howard explained that the reason Starfield was so divisive was because it was too different, completely ignoring the fact that a lot of the game's problems are things the studio has struggled with for decades now, bugs that have been in the engine since Oblivion, weird quirks like stuff disappearing from your house, the dull workman-like writing, the inconsistent world building and repetitive points of interest, the extremely basic quest design. These are all issues the studio has always struggled with. Believe me, it's not because it's too different. And that isn't to say Starfield doesn't have a bunch of exclusive problems on top of all that, but come on. The phrase toxic positivity is getting thrown around a lot lately, but given the way Bethesda chooses to present themselves, it's not hard to see it as a workplace where confronting difficult truths is suppressed and where everyone is expected to be positive no matter what. From reading Todd Howard's interviews, and others at the studio even, they seem legitimately surprised and kind of confused by negative fan reactions to Starfield. Like the thought never crossed their minds that people wouldn't like it. It's like when you read about Concord and how much of an expensive disaster that game was. It's a game that for the entire design process, nobody stopped and said no. They looked at all these designs, at the whole story-driven, whatever that is, And the amount of money that was getting pumped into it, and everybody down the line said, yeah, that's fine. Or even better than fine, it's going to be a hit. Even though, no, anyone with two eyes can tell you Concord was going to be a flop. I'm not going to lie. There's things about it that looked cool. I liked the heavies, the big robot heavies. But that's like one thing. I always try to give new IPs the benefit of the doubt and try to find positives in them. But let's be serious. I don't think anybody really thought Concord was going to catch on. But the difference between Concord and Starfield is that Bethesda is a proven studio with a track record of things that people like. They have a unique position in the industry where they're basically the only ones making the kind of game they make, and it just so happens to be incredibly popular, so they kind of have a massive captive audience. For a while, at least, that was enough. They've weathered criticism in the past and came out smelling like roses, mostly due to the fact that their games have been satisfying for their very large captive audience. Starfield's situation is different. The voices against it aren't getting quieter, they're getting louder, and the more Bethesda tries to ignore or dismiss them, the more clueless or callous they appear. But here's the thing. Starfield, by any metric, is not a failure. According to statistics, it's the 11th best-selling game of 2023, and that's with it on Game Pass and not selling on PlayStation consoles. It's made some money, there's no doubt about that, but most players picked it up, played through it, and then stopped. That's not how Bethesda's other games have gone. They have long tails that people tend to really hook their claws down into it and make it do what they want to do. Starfield, on the other hand, seems to have lost most of its audience, and they don't seem to be coming back. This is imprecise science, I admit, but compare the amount of people playing Starfield now compared to Skyrim Special Edition, which is a game that exists right now and has more than double the player base right now than that of Starfield. On Steam, anyways. And the DLC didn't seem to make much of an impression at all. Maybe everyone's actually playing it on Xbox Game Pass, but I don't think that's the case. That seems doubtful to me. I don't know enough about Stars to dispute it, but that's gotta be wrong. I think, and this is my personal theory here, but I think that most people just didn't care about Shattered Space. Bethesda set expectations pretty low, or perhaps other people set those expectations for them. I don't know. They're complaining about high expectations, but I don't think anybody really went in with high expectations. And that's just among the people that went in. I think out of the people that could have showed up to the party, not a lot of them did. These kinds of drop-offs are normal for DLC for most games. Like, you'd be surprised how few people actually buy DLCs for games that are relatively popular on Steam. It's sometimes a shockingly small amount, but this is Bethesda. This is Starfield. It's a big marquee release from them. It's the main reason Microsoft bought Bethesda in the first place. All the suits wanted the next Skyrim, but Starfield, it just isn't that. And unless Bethesda starts taking criticism seriously, it's never going to be. I'm not saying some kind of turnaround is impossible, but in Starfield's case, it's a real uphill battle, and in order to do it, they kind of have to embrace the fact that they have to. The biggest problems with Cyberpunk were mostly fixable. The bugs, the disappointing skill system, the way clothing worked, a few quality of life improvements. To be fair, it also took years. Starfield has not been here for the amount of time that it took Cyberpunk to be fixed, so it's not exactly a one-to-one thing, but the difference is, by this point, CD Projekt Red was taking criticism to the game very seriously, like actually sounded like they wanted to turn the whole thing around. For them, fixing Cyberpunk wasn't just about repairing their reputation, it was about saving their future as a studio and keeping the Cyberpunk IP valuable. At release, Starfield was not a mess in the way that Cyberpunk was. Yeah, it's got bugs, but it's probably the least buggy Bethesda game to date, and it mostly works correctly. The problems with Starfield go deeper. Yeah, they could fix the bad skill trees. Those things have way too many required skills on them, but that's not impossible to fix. There's also the mind-numbingly boring way you get space powers, but then there's still the planks of wood they're calling companions, the copy-pasted points of interest that break immersion when you find a picnic table and outdoor chairs and food on a planet with no atmosphere, or the loading screens, or the nightmarish mazes they call custom ships, or how little sense the entire space cowboy faction makes. All this stuff individually can be overlooked or even fixed, but all together, it's not possible to ignore it. The thing is, Bethesda Game Studio continues to ignore legitimate criticism and just frame it as fans being too demanding, or even that they're playing it wrong and don't understand the game. And hell, that's their right. I mean, we allegedly live in a free country. If they want to ignore their own community and keep doing whatever the hell they're doing, they're fine. That's their right. as Americans. But if you're making a game that a major part of your fan base doesn't seem to be happy with, don't expect them to come back for the next one. Now, will all the discontent around Starfield end up hurting Elder Scrolls 6? I don't know, probably not. By the time that game actually comes out in 2027 or whenever, Starfield will probably be a distant memory, and we'll go through this entire cycle of expectation and disappointment all over again. But maybe they'll do it right, and it won't matter. I don't know. I will say they're coming off increasingly out of touch, though. I don't know if that means they're making the games they want to make or they just want to have jobs still. But critics be damned, I don't have a lot of high hopes for the next one. I'm not going to pretend that we couldn't all be writing off Starfield too soon. The recently released Creation Kit could turn the game's fortunes around and keep people coming back. But it's hard to say just how popular mods are going to be for the game right now because it's too early to say whether players are going to revolutionize the game themselves or just move on to something else. The creation tools aren't well documented at the moment, and major features like new planets are not possible. Even something like making a new dialogue is difficult because any new lip syncing requires an expensive plugin to even do. So for now, we're just getting a bunch of Star Wars stuff ported into Starfield. So at least right now, mods aren't the silver bullet to save the game. There's a lot of small quality of life things they can do right now, but for anything major, it's going to take a while. But even so, there's still a chance for Starfield to turn things around. I mean, it's perfectly possible Bethesda's taking the negative reception of Shattered Space to heart, and maybe are doing things internally to respond to it. They managed to turn things around with Fallout 76, even if the situation there isn't exactly the same because the main studio wasn't responsible for that game, while with Starfield they are. Still, it shows that they're a company that is capable of recognizing when they failed, and it's possible they can allocate resources into changing things for the better in the future. Ultimately, the reason anyone cares about the quality of Starfield is because we all generally like Bethesda games and want them to be good, at least most of us. Starfield's a game with so much unrealized potential, and I think that's what gets people so worked up about it. So when a DLC that's honestly, I guess, fine, is getting mostly negative reviews on Steam, it's because fans have a certain perception. It looks like Bethesda is kind of just going through the motions and arguing with the fan base instead of trying to fix the game's flaws. I mean, how else are we supposed to interpret this? My optimism is in no way meant to be mud in the eye of any dissatisfied fan, said Emil in this tweet thread. That's not how it works. How else is it supposed to work? First you tell people they're playing the game wrong, now they're, personally held opinions about the game are just straight up wrong. It's one of those statements that's not exactly wrong because, yeah, being positive about a game in an interview doesn't mean anything other than they were positive in an interview, but instead of addressing the substance of the argument, it feels like Bethesda is just ignoring fan concerns and feels like engaging in pointlessly dismissive semantics. That might win you some points in debate class, Emil, but it awards you nothing in the court of public opinion. And again, you are operating in a market where the customer gives you money to buy things. They don't have to do that. And I think that's what Bethesda really needs to concern itself with. But that's my opinion. I don't know if Emil would regard it as a good opinion or not, but what's yours? Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. The best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Gameranx.